All right, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Coffee and Chat with Rev Bruce. And I want to, thank you for joining in. I'm glad to have you. Today, we're just looking at, inspiring you once again with one of our guests. And so, just so we can get started, I just want to make sure that we understand if you're a dreamer, if you're a dreamer, the goal is for you to eventually become a doer. And so hopefully these people inspire you to move into that and become a doer. But dreamers who don't become doers usually live a certain life. They live a life of resentment. They live a life of regret, and they live a life of refusal. Resentment, they tend to resent others who become successful. They say, well, that was, that wasn't all that, or they just got lucky. They live a life of regret that they had a dream and never did anything with it. And so they're living a life of regret. And they have a life of refusal because they refuse to, accept that their dreams can still become a reality. And so don't be a dreamer who never becomes a doer. Don't be a dreamer who never becomes a doer. Go after those dreams and have something to show for it. And I want to share today because coming today is a lady who is definitely sharing in her capacity to grow and grow her brand. And so we're going to be talking to Lakeysha Sowunmi, and she is definitely someone who you will be impressed with. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring her on, and here we are. Boom. How you doing today?
Good morning, Rob.
All right. So I just want to make sure that, everything is everything. And so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so, I have been here in San Diego for about 20 years now. I come by way of the Navy, so I spent some time in the Navy. San Diego was actually my first duty station. So I'm here in San Diego. I got married in San Diego. I gave birth to three beautiful kids here in San Diego. And so my life has really been around my family, around, living out my dream. Ever since I was a little girl, I've always been that risk taker. I've always been that person to do things that, I didn't know what the results would be, but I was always the one taking that chance. And I always say that since I'm the baby of the family, that maybe that has something to do with it, but it may not, So I've just really lived my life, living my life, doing what I'm passionate about, and also doing what I love to do.
Well, that's cool. That's the whole idea is that you can tap into that and get that. And so, I'm happy for you. Um, let me ask you this: you're a mother, an author, a personal trainer, and coach. Describe, your process of balancing all those roles. You know what I mean?
Yes, I juggle a lot of balls. I wear a lot of hats for almost 20 years. And I say almost 20 years because my son is almost 20 years old. And wow, I feel really old. But, I've come to the conclusion that I will never be able to do it all. And what I mean by doing it all is really realizing and recognizing that sometimes I may I may drop the ball. Sometimes I may not be able to go hard and like do 100% all the time. Being a mother, being a wife, being an entrepreneur, all those things, it takes a level of discipline, and it takes a level of reality, knowing that you can't be all things to everybody, knowing that you have to, set those boundaries. And also know that sometimes you will drop the ball, and that's okay. Some things though that I do to make sure that I'm able to do what I'm committed to do is, the first thing is that I wake up really early in the morning. I wake up at 5, sometimes 4:30, just to get ahead of the game. As a mother, once your kids get up, you're up and you're going, you're doing things for them. But when I get up early in the morning, that gives me time to meditate. That gives me time to work out. That gives me time to journal. That also gives me time to do things that I love to do, which is writing and a lot of other things. So waking up early in the morning is the first thing. The second thing I would definitely have to say, is setting your boundaries. A lot of people, they may pull on you. A lot of people may ask of you or require things of you. And if you stop every time and do those things for those people at that time, you won't be focused. You may end up just being distracted and not doing what you're supposed to do. So the second thing I do is set boundaries. And I love everybody, but I can't be there for you at all times. And I feel like my family and friends, they know that and they get that. And I'm not ashamed of that, because again, if I stop and I do things for everybody all the time, I'll get distracted. So that's the second thing, is setting boundaries. The third thing is I practice self-care. I am a self-care advocate. I work with mothers a lot, and I work with them, and they just tell me, like, I don't have time for myself. I don't have time at all. Well, you have to make time. And as a mother, you can't pour from an empty cup. And
Mm.
so that's where I come from. And that's why I promote self-care, because if you don't have energy, if you're not in the mood, if you're not eating really well, if you're not drinking enough water, if you're not exercising,
Hmm.
how could you be there for somebody else? And so self-care is more than just, eating right and exercising. Self-care is taking your time and doing something that you love. It may be reading a book, it may be,
Hmm.
lighting a candle, it may be a lot of things. So I also promote self-care.
So,
And
so to go along with that, you kind of take the model they used to do on the airplane, where if you're traveling with children, put the mask on yourself before you try to put the mask on the children.
absolutely.
Okay.
And when you do that, you're a better parent, you're a better spouse, you're a better friend. I'm a better daughter when I take care of myself first. And
Mm.
it's not a selfish thing. It's more of, you know what? I need to be my best version of myself in order to help somebody else out. So that's how I juggle it all. I just make sure that I prioritize and I follow those things. I have my routine and everything like that. And so I wouldn't call it balance. I would just say it's managing your life well. Because
Okay.
again, you can't be all things, and you can't definitely be all things for all people.
So it's more like you said, managing your life well.
Yes.
Okay. So let's look at how did you get into your work within the fitness and faith community? How did that shape your whole entrepreneurial ventures?
Yeah. So, I grew up in church, and a lot of people that I work with, they also grew up in church, but some not so much. And I grew up in a time where there was food all the time, food everywhere. And if you're like me, you probably are like me, so, but we were at church like 3 times a day on Sunday. And during the week, we were there more. And guess what? If we're there that much at church, it'll be food around. And so, I kind of grew up in that era. And, I just remember, like, sometimes after Sunday school, we would, leave church and we would go to the corner store and we would get, snacks and chips and all that stuff. And again, you know, a lot of times that food was readily available at church. And what did they serve at church? They sold a lot of fried stuff. They sold a lot of sugary things. It was just things that weren't so good for us, you know. And it was a lot of comfort food, you know, like a lot of soul food and things like that.
Yeah.
But as I became an adult, and when, you know, I started raising my kids in church, and when I went to church, I knew that I wanted to change that type of atmosphere. Because as you know, African Americans, we suffer greatly from diabetes, high blood pressure, all that stuff. And I didn't want that for myself. And I didn't want that for family members or other congregation members of the church. So I remember just talking to Pastor, and I was like, look, you know, I think we have the opportunity to really start a ministry here where we could encourage the members to eat better. We could encourage them to exercise and just have challenges, events, all that stuff. So we could see people move. So we could see people get off of the medication that they're on.
Mm-hmm.
So Pastor was on board. And so I started a fitness ministry at my church. And from there, I saw a lot of results, positive results. People were receptive and they wanted more. So outside of church, I started my own business. And that business was reaching out. At that time, it was really to moms because I could relate to them at a level where maybe a male trainer couldn't relate to them. You know what I mean? And, you know, and so I was there to impart that knowledge and that wisdom into them. So I would definitely say I started my ministry was birthed out of the fitness ministry at my church.
Okay. And you mentioned working with moms, and you you were recognized as a, you know, California public health champion mom, you know, featured
Yeah.
in videos and presentations and things of that nature. And so your voice as a health advocate and health promoter um, was already echoing in other circles, especially in the faith community, with that outreach. And so in shaping your business, how much of that was in the ministry, how much did that translate to your business? Because, you know, like you mentioned in church, you know, food is fellowship.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, whether it be with the fish fries or whatever, that was also part of the fundraising of the church, you know. And so for a lot of traditionalists, like, whoa, wait a minute, you know, but, you know, like you said, you were able to deliver it and it was received. And so how much of that same energy were you able to translate over to your business venture?
Yeah. So I would definitely have to say, just working with the church, working with people, it kind of forced me. So in my mind, I was just thinking like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get certified as a personal trainer, which I did. I went, I pursued my personal trainer certificate. I got that. And then as time went on, I was like, you know what? I'm teaching a lot of health education classes. I'm doing a lot of cooking demonstrations. Oh, Lord, I did a lot of that. And I said, you know what? Now I'm going to pursue my certification as a certified nutrition specialist. And so that's what I was able to do. And I always tell people always ask me, like, how did you get to where you are now? What was your path like? And I know it sounds cliche to say, oh, it's my calling, but I really feel like it was my calling to do what I do now, because the need of the church and also the need of people outside of the church, they needed that education. You would be surprised at the number of people that still don't know how to read a food label. And so what I was able to do in the church, that helped me, that opened the door for me to also do that outside of church. And as you mentioned before, you know, as a champion mom, I was an ambassador. And with that title, I was able to go on TV commercials. I was on billboards, my family and I, did a lot of media, and we tapped into areas, not only the faith-based community, but also we tapped into areas where they may not hear this message, and the road has been a blessing because I've been able to make an impact in lives that if I was just to stay in the four walls of a church, that I may not reach those people.
So I appreciate that, because there's an element within the church that says, hey, what you do, let me just say it like I heard someone else say, only what you do for Christ will last. But a lot of that says you should just focus on the ministry or the auxiliaries of the church. But the ability to see that there was a need beyond the pews, that's striking there. So then you get into this whole thing of, you mentioned you love to write, but then you write these books, and these books focus on children. Why did you select that audience, for your message of promoting health and wellness?
Yeah, as a mother, I will have to always go back and think of my role as a mother. And my role as a mother is to provide my children with the best wellness, the best life that they could have. And I know that starts with building a healthy foundation. So I wrote a couple of children's books. Those books focus on different virtues, kindness, patience, and all that. But that also ties to their emotional wellness as well as their mental wellness. So when I started my path, I kind of thought it was just about what you put in your body and what you did to your body. But it turns out that we are more than just what we eat and what we do. We're also spiritual beings. We have mental health, we have emotional health, we have, physical health. And so with my books and also with my nonprofit for children's health, my goal was to encompass every aspect of wellness. I want kids to know that if they start now, if they start their healthy foundation now, it won't be a struggle, or they won't stray too far from what you've taught them. My son, who's almost 20 years old, I'm so impressed and even motivated by him, because everything that my husband and I have taught him as a youth, he's actually using everything that we taught him right now as it pertains to health and wellness. He's always at the gym. He's eating really good. He plays sports most of his life. And so my job as a mother and also as a community health advocate is to make sure not only that my kids are educated as far as wellness and as far as what they eat and getting out there and exercise, but I wanted to educate a community of folks. I had so much in me. And so when I reached outside of my box, I was able to, impact others in the community. So that's why I always include kids, because although my kids are older now, I always feel like everyone needs to build that foundation in the lives of kids.
And it's typical with children's books. Someone has to read it to the child in most cases. So you also create an audience with the parent as well.
Yep. That's absolutely a way to engage the parents, because if you think about it, as a health educator, if I go to a school, if I do a lovely presentation on what and what not to eat, and I give that child a package and I say, here you go, I'll see you later. Um, that's great, but it's not until the parents stop in or jump in and get engaged in what I'm trying to teach their child, until that happens, that's going to fall by the wayside. So I always encourage parents to really be engaged with that. And oftentimes, when I've held like events or workshops and classes for the kids, I always invite the parents, because they need to they need to carry the torch. It's not going to be on the child, because I know that when I go to the grocery store, that the choice, I make the choices on what my kids eat. They don't make the choices, although they try, but I make the choices. So it's really important to engage those parents as well. They are part of the process, even as it pertains to parents. When I grew up, my mom, my cousins, my aunties, they would send us outside. We would go outside and we would come home until, we wouldn't come home until the street lights came on. But now we're in a different society where it's not that safe, right? And so what I encourage parents to do is to go out with your child. I'm always outside with them. If they want to play tennis, if they want to roller skate, basketball, I'm always out there with them. And so unless the parent is fully engaged, it may just go by the wayside.
Okay. And so that's, another way of sharing with the entire family, tapping into the traditional role of the mother, picking the food. And so you invite all parents to your presentations. That's commendable. Looking at it, can you name someone who truly inspired you and provided you with the motivation to chase your own goals?
Yeah, I always go back. Number one, my number one hero is my mom. My mom is resilient. Growing up, she made sure that I lack for nothing, and so she's my number one hero. But
Okay.
in addition to that, I do have another group of women that are there, and they're mentors, quite frankly. I mean, it's about four of them, and I call them my squad, really, because they're there to cheer me on when times get tough. They're motivating me. The level of success that they have, I admire that. And so it's always been just a group of women, because they actually serve different purposes. One may help me, with my books. The other may help me with my nonprofit organization. So I always believe that women, even men, you always need that network of people that are there on your side, because it's enough negativity, it's enough naysayers, it's enough people that are like, well, I'm just waiting for that person to fall, or haters. But I've always had a group of women that are always there believing in me, cheering me on and all that stuff. So it's always just been a network of women, powerful women.
Okay. And I really can dig into that, because on the opposite end, when we talk about entrepreneurism and startups, a lot of people tend to think that when we talk about bootstrapping and building your own business, it's strictly you on your own, and it doesn't incorporate any other support for your success or even sustainability.
No. And I always say that no man is on an island on their own. Never. The most successful people that I've seen were people that had other people pushing them, or praying for them, or encouraging them. Not to say that those people are giving you ideas or giving you feedback. That's great. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying you need that group of people to say, girl, you got it. Keep going. I'm praying for you. I see you. Sharing a post on Instagram or sharing something that pertains to your business. You always need that. And people are more successful with a group of people helping them than not.
Well, like they say in the church, amen.
Yeah.
Listen, that's encouraging. So today, we see a lot of calls for changes in the current system and structure. How would you compare that activism today to what we see or understand as health advocacy and activism?
I think I always say this, and being in public health for almost 20 years, I feel like our work is a marathon and not a sprint. My life's work has been focused around policies, pushing healthy eating, exercises, especially in communities of color.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel like what I've done and what you've done and what all the rest of us public health advocates have done over the years, I feel like we have gained momentum. Sometimes I feel like we've only scratched the surface. And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like even with great campaigns and great initiatives, the fight is going to continue. It's going to continue. It's going to go on. I mean, one year we may be heavily focused on tobacco. The next year, we're going to go back to focusing on obesity.
Mm-hmm.
So I always just say that it's going to take a long time. I feel like I'm going to be in this struggle for a long time, and until we're all free, nobody is going to really be free. Um, it takes a long time, you know. Even as you know, like back in the day, they protested, they did this, they did that. That was great, but look at where we are now. We're still like doing that type of stuff. So I'm in it for a long haul. And when we have interns, when I have interns come and volunteer with my program and everything, I make sure I tell them like, look, if you're not in this for the long run, I don't know if this is something that you want to pursue, because it may take you 10 or 20 years to see something that you've been advocating for like all your life. And if that's discouraging to you, or if that's discouraging to somebody you know, it's just like, man, maybe you want to, pursue another field, because this thing is long. It's going to take us forever to see like different changes.
Yeah, I mean, public policy work, for instance, that's a extensive, sometimes grueling and frustrating process because of the different levels it entails. And so in a lot of cases, it is easier per se to change a policy within the church or even within the community through, relationships with local grocers than it is to say, let's mandate this with the state,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah. And although let's just say you're working from within, okay? So you start with the church is on board. And then maybe you want to go to a conference where you know that, let's just say, for example, there was a Church of God in Christ conference, and it'll be maybe 200 other churches there that's represented. Then you could try to, implement something there. But then when it gets to the state level, when it gets to going above that,
Mm-hmm.
that's what take a lot of time, because you're telling somebody, you're telling your city, you're telling your state that you want to change things from what it's been. And you have a lot of people that's for that, but then you have a lot of people that's against that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always, yes, it's personal responsibility. Yes, of course. But it always makes a difference if there was, or if there is, a policy that's set in place. And not only set in place, but it needs to be enforced. When I was working with the faith communities, oh man, I helped churches implement a lot of healthy eating policies. It was great. We celebrated. It was amazing. But then I would go back, maybe a year later or 6 months later, and I'm like, oh, how is that policy doing? Well, it's okay, but we really not, enforcing it. So then you have that enforcement piece where you actually need a group of people to go back and make sure that that's enforced.
Yeah. So you basically have to train someone to leave in place behind who's kind of the vanguard of that policy. And it doesn't always have to be a nurse. It can be
Right.
a parent as well, you know.
That's right. And that's where I feel like that's how sustainability takes place. If I'm working really hard to, let's say for 5 years, I'm working really hard to make sure that the policy is implemented, or to make sure that, oh, we have a walking group, or now we have a community garden. Well, if I'm no longer there and somebody say volunteers like, oh, I want to keep this going, that's sustainability. But if I work for 5 or 10 years to, get something going, and I leave and it is not working or it's not in place, that's not sustainability. So when it comes to health advocacy or like policy implementation, sustainability is key, because that's how you're going to see it go on and on and on.
Yeah, and so you mentioned in one of your comments about scratching the surface. You know, like a lot of work, but it seems to only be scratching the surface. What do you mean by scratching the surface? What's the deeper part of the work that you see?
Yeah. So when I say scratching the surface, I'm really just talking about maybe just bringing that awareness.
Hmm.
I've maybe opened the eyes, right? The second part of that would be bringing the attention to that particular issue. It could be, before I wasn't allowed to go, let's say, to a city council meeting and talk about this, but now I'm able to, because now I have the attention of community members, I have attention of these policymakers. That's just scratching the surface. Anything beyond that, I would say, even if you're scratching the surface, that's success in a way. But I feel like you're making small waves to, in
Mm.
order to like implement that policy, or in order to see some infrastructural changes. So scratching the surface is good, but it's not enough.
Mm. All right.
Yeah.
So if you had to offer some advice to today's aspiring female entrepreneurs about getting started, what would you share with them as far as something to inspire them to get that start?
So I would definitely share my story of just going for it. As I mentioned before at the beginning of this conversation, is that, as a child, I always had ambition. I was always driven. I was always determined to be better and to do something that was great. Although at that age, I may not have, known what that would be, or who I would be to this day, but I always had that ambition. And sometimes as you get older, there'll be folks in your ear, life happens, you face barriers, you face challenges, and that dream or that ambition, sometimes it could get watered down. And so I would encourage somebody today that if you felt the way that I felt, or even as an adult, you felt like, I want to make a change, I want to make a difference. I see a problem here. There's an issue here that I feel like I could be part of the solution. I would encourage you to start making moves, start taking steps towards your vision, towards your goal. If somebody was to tell me that I would be living the life that I'm living now, I wouldn't believe them, because I face that chatter. I face those barriers and challenges and all that. But I am here to tell you that if you focus on your vision, write it down. Every January, this past January, and the year before that, and the year before that, I always write my goals down. And I'm not talking about just getting a piece of paper and say, I want to I want to lose 20 pounds. No, I mean, just like get into it. Write smart goals down, goals that you know that you can achieve. And what that does is hold yourself accountable. Because guess what? Earlier, I mentioned that I have a lot of mentors in my life. They're great, but when it comes to it, I have to do the work. I have to sometimes I have to wake up and encourage myself, right? So those goals make you accountable. If you're not accountable to yourself, if you're not committed to what you wrote down, to what you said you would become, to school, to losing weight, nobody is going to do that for you. So stay committed to your goals and go for it. It doesn't matter if you don't have support. It doesn't matter if you don't have somebody patting you on the back. Go ahead, Keisha, you can do it. I don't need that because I know what I want to do and I can see myself in a better place in a year or in 2 years because I'm holding myself accountable. So even if you don't have support, I can tell you right now, as an entrepreneur, the people that you think should support you, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to support you. I have a lot of family, I have a lot of strangers that support me, and that feels great. But again, if they don't support me, I'm going to keep doing what I do regardless. So don't worry about supporters. And if you think of it in a way that God has given you something special,
Mm.
God has given you one life, you don't want to be that person that comes to the end of your life and say, man, I should have did that. Or man, I wish I would have took that leap of faith. Don't be that person. Don't be the one to live a life of regret. Because at the end of the day, you're gonna die with those dreams. You're gonna die with that vision. So that's that's what I have to offer, and that's what keeps me going. And I try to encourage people all the time, but at the end of the day, you have to put in the work. You have to encourage yourself. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your product. You have to believe in what you're doing. And even if you don't get praise, even if you don't get hand clap or whatever, you got to keep going.
Yeah, yeah, girl, you said a lot right there, and I I have to say, especially when you mention the part about the people that you think would be behind you and supporting you and backing you. Lo and behold, that may not be who really is supporting you.
Right.
And so not having that dependency upon, well, I thought Becky was my friend, and Becky's not even, not even in the loop. She's not helping me out.
Right.
It's a notion that sometimes we need to get out of it. I believe it's like this: if my current circle isn't supporting what I'm doing, I don't need to blame anybody. I just need to broaden my circle.
That's right. Yep.
You know, and so I think that part of what you're saying to, you know, not just young people, but anybody that's looking to do anything with their dream is to, you know, broaden their perspective on it, but also don't lose hope because of who's around you.
That's
You
right.
know.
And I could tell you the amount of people that have reached out to me because I decided to walk out in what I believe that God has called me to do.
Mm.
People tell me all the time, like, oh my gosh, I'm inspired, I'm encouraged to do that. What if I didn't do that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if
Shame
I
on
didn't
you.
take,
Shame on you.
right, right.
Yeah.
What if I didn't take that leap of faith? Susie or Rebecca, they would just kind of be like, and then at some point, you have to realize that the world is waiting on something that you have to offer, something that only I could give the world, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I know that God designed it that way to get us to get moving, because we all have something to offer. And that's what I always tell kids. Like, if you find something when they're trying to identify what they want to do when they get older, if they find something that they feel like they have a solution to, or if they find something or a problem that they feel like, man, I could really help Rebecca wake up in the morning by, creating this alarm clock, because this alarm clock, it actually shakes your bed and it won't stop shaking until you get up. I mean, if kids, if they feel discouraged because maybe they don't want to be a doctor, maybe they don't want to be a lawyer, or maybe they don't want to do a lot of things, all they have to do is sit back and think about, what problem can I address? How can I make the world a better place? And
Yeah.
that's how we develop creators, because that's what we are. We're creators. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I get
Yeah.
excited talking about it.
Yeah, that's powerful, because the sad part is, I'm going to say it because I don't want you to get in trouble for saying it, but the sad part is sometimes in church we squash that. Sometimes we limit the the power and ability that we say that people should have, simply because here's a simple formula. If you were created by the force that creates all things, and you were made in the same image of the same force that creates all things, you then are also given and embodied with the breath of that same force that creates all things.
Come on.
And what else is in you?
Come on.
You know what I'm saying? Not only were you shaped by the quote unquote hands of that creative force, but you have the breath of that creative force. And undoubtedly, in the English language, that's what they call to inspire somebody, to breathe into them. And so I don't get how sometimes in church it's like, well, maybe that's not the Lord's voice talking to you. But you have this creative force, this creative power naturally embodied in you.
Yeah. And with that thinking, you could say, because I know I have that force, nothing is impossible. Nothing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it's even in our mindset, like, man, I come from a family where, we didn't talk about money. So we can't use money to do this, or I feel financially illiterate. It all starts with the mindset of, man, nothing is impossible. I don't care. You could say, like, I didn't go to college. I didn't, I don't have the credentials. I don't have that. But that doesn't stop me from chasing my dreams. Nothing is impossible.
Yeah. And I love how Paul puts it to Timothy. He said, God didn't give us the spirit of fear.
Right.
But we have, a spirit of power, a spirit of determination, to be all these things and to do all these things. And so when we look at it, even more so, I would hope and pray that churches do produce more people like you that have the ability to come out and create something, and then from there say, wait a minute, I think more than the church needs this. Let me go ahead and open this up, because is essentially what we're supposed to do. If we only take care of our own, we become the H word. We become hypocrites.
Yeah.
That's what Jesus said. That and that was to say we're two-faced. We say a whole lot of good things and bless you and all this other stuff, but we don't back it up. And so, thank God that you had the opportunity within the church, but also had the foresight to say, this is something that needs to go beyond the church.
That's right. And I feel like it's not coincidental that you hear a lot of people, more so a lot of artists that say, I started in church.
Mm-hmm.
And I would, I find myself saying that too, like, whoa, my ministry was actually birthed in church. That's not a coincidence, because if you think about it and you think about what the Bible says, yes, we could start it and create it there, but then we have to go beyond those four
Mm-hmm.
walls. We have to go out in the world. But
Yeah.
in ministry, that's where it's nurtured, that's where it's developed. I feel like that's where, because a lot of businesses, let's just be honest, they don't have integrity. They don't have this or
Mm-hmm.
they don't have that. But I feel like when you started in a church, it's just like you kind of build those things and then you go out. Oh my God. And you talking about impact, it it's the gift that keeps on giving, keeps on giving. For me, that is my testimony. Starting in church, and and I'm not saying that if you don't start in church, you're
Mm-hmm.
not going anywhere. But I'm just saying, as a believer, and I know this to be true because I started there. It keeps on giving. So many open doors for me. Even today, God is just I just can't even tell it all because I started in church. And I definitely have to say that I was given the platform to do that. I was given the platform to actually do that. So that's important too. Your pastor has to see that in you and has to believe in you and has to help you promote that
Mm-hmm.
ministry within the ministry. So
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to host church too early today. You know what I'm saying? But it's hard to get away from it as a Christian in business, dealing with the world and dealing with God's people, right? Who are, as the Bible says, a peculiar people, right?
yeah,
And to say that here you are, because on another side of it, when you do start something in church and then you do quote unquote use it as an outgrowth to go into the world, some people then go to Malachi and say, well, will a man rob God? What are you doing? That's something that belongs in the church. Aretha faced that.
yeah,
When she went into R&B music and went away from gospel. And so there is a tendency also for there to be some resistance of it going outside of those four walls.
yeah.
And so for you and your journey, did you ever encounter that that resistance or tension or questioning of like, well, what are you doing?
Yeah. I would have to say, and I'm only speaking for myself, is no,
Mm-hmm.
I never got resistance. It was more of like, yo, go live your best life. This is great
Amen.
because they saw the benefits of not only that ministry being effective, but they knew that I had what it took, to go out there and just bless others. So I
Yeah.
never received that drawback of like, oh, what are you doing?
Amen.
Because I started in the ministry, they saw like, yo, she's really impactful and she's effective. So, Godspeed.
Amen. Yeah. And I think that's amazing. And for anybody listening, if you want, if you want the books that Lakeysha has written, you know, Apple Leaves, it's right there in the description on the YouTube channel, right? Check out the description. You can click the link, get the books, um, get at it, and if you want to find out more of what she has going on, here's the website link. It's it's not that hard, when we talk about reaching people,
That's right.
and let's get real. Um, People are more accessible than you think, and so Reach out to her, talk with her if you want to know more about her journey, definitely. And if you want to find out more about what she has to offer, there's so much more that she's doing and sharing. And so, from me to you, Keisha, I have to say, thank you for continuing in the work and expanding the work, and it's impressive, to say the least. And it's also, in another word that you mentioned before, it's impactful.
Yeah.
The amount of people that are touched by just you speaking at conferences and serving as keynote. And I just want to say this is something that um, is blessing other people, and it should be multiplied. There should be multiple Lakeishas out there, and so hopefully your story, your journey inspires those other voices that need to speak, those other hands that need to get involved with the work. So, I thank you on behalf of other folks that would like to see this grow. And so bless you. And I hope that you continue to have more blessings, and before you leave, just, we showed it earlier, but you got some love out here, and so, is it LaTanya Cook? LaTanya Cook said, she's proud of you, and she's loving it. So, this is what's going on. And so definitely listen, y'all. This is not it's not a sales pitch or anything. This is just reality that somebody needs to be encouraged today. And hopefully somebody got what they needed. And if you listen to her, I have to tell you, you got a full plate and then some. You know what I'm saying? You got the main course, the veggies on the side, and a biscuit to go with it. So that's all you need to do right now. Wash it down. All right. So you know what? Thank you again. God bless. And listen, y'all, we'll be back next week. Peace.